Marnie and Blaine Stevenson first met the Hookers in late 2023.
While anchored close to one another in Bradenton, Florida,
they sailed together and shared many meals. They forged the unique bond that only fellow liveaboard sailors truly understand. Tied together by proximity and deep experiences on the ocean, they truly believed they knew Brian and Lynette Hooker very well. Then, on April 7, 2026,
3 days after Lynette vanished, and just 1 day before Bahamian authorities took Brian into custody,
Blaine Stevenson reached for his phone and dialed Brian Hooker. Active search and rescue efforts were still underway. Lynette was still missing, and Brian remained a free man,
staying in the Bahamas, repeatedly claiming his only priority was finding his wife.
Their conversation lasted nearly 40 minutes.
Blaine Stevenson secretly recorded the audio, and Brian had no idea.
CBS News obtained that tape and verified it.
Reporters shared critical details that could only come from analyzing the actual audio
and confirming the recording was completely genuine.
What Brian Hooker admitted during that 40-minute call, speaking openly to trusted friends,
completely unaware that his voice was being captured, has now become a critical piece of the official investigation.
On that tape, describing the moment his wife of 25 years went into the ocean on April 4, 2026,
Brian Hooker used a highly unusual phrase.
He never claimed she fell. He did not say she slipped or simply fell overboard.
He claimed she basically just bounced off the dinghy.
In this case, victim Lynette Hooker was 55 years old. Hailing from Onsted, Michigan, she had left behind her successful career,
her home, and all her belongings to embrace the ocean life she built with Brian.
The married couple had traveled the seas for over a decade as the Sailing Hookers.
Their days were filled with sea turtles, sunsets, and treats baked aboard their 55-foot sailboat named Soulmate.
Her mother, Darlene Hamlet, told the Associated Press that Lynette had grown up around boats and water her whole life.
Her daughter, Carly Ellsworth,
told CBS News that her mother was physically strong and an excellent swimmer who could not have easily fallen overboard.
Lynette posted to Instagram on April 4, 2026, the very day she vanished.
Her caption read, "Not going anywhere for a while." She had absolutely no idea.
Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications before we move forward.
We analyze the documented evidence, verify every claim, and name our sources. We strictly stick to facts supported by the official public record.
Now, let us examine exactly what Brian Hooker said on that recording, why his specific phrasing matters so much, and what the full 40-minute tape reveals about the story he told to the people who knew him best,
compared to the story he told everyone else.
Before we analyze that specific word, let us look at the context of this recording, because the setup matters just as much as the audio.
Blaine and Marnie Stevenson never planned to capture a confession
or any piece of incriminating evidence.
They just dialed a friend whose wife had vanished. They called out of pure concern.
They called because that is what you do when a friend is facing a crisis. It was a private call.
Brian was down in the Bahamas, fresh off what he called the worst night of his life.
He was opening up to trusted friends, people who had sailed with him and Lynette, people he assumed would never doubt a single word of his story. Brian Hooker had no idea anyone was recording the conversation. Blaine Stevenson directly confirmed this to CNN. He posted the audio on YouTube once Brian was placed under arrest.
Because, as he explained to NBC News,
Brian could not speak for himself behind bars, so Stevenson wanted to share Brian's own side of the story.
Exactly how Brian originally described it.
That detail is crucial. Brian was not performing for the police.
He was not carefully measuring his words for an official statement.
No lawyers were speaking for him. He was just talking to friends. The way a person describes a traumatic event to trusted friends just hours after it occurs
when their guard is totally down.
Is usually the most raw version of their story. It is the narrative before lawyers start polishing the language.
And in that raw conversation, speaking with people he trusted.
Completely unaware he was being recorded, Brian Hooker described his wife hitting the water using one highly specific word.
She basically just bounced off the dinghy. Let us look closely at what that word means and what it does not. Bounced is a term that defines a very distinct physical motion. An object bounces when it strikes a surface and rebounds with force. A basketball bounces. Kids bounce on a trampoline. An object bounces when it impacts a solid barrier and either springs straight back or ricochets off at an angle. Bouncing requires impact with a surface. It implies a solid barrier was hit, resulting in a sudden, forceful pushback. Falling is entirely different. People fall when they lose their balance. They trip, or maybe they get caught off guard by a wave. Anyone falling from a boat has lost their footing and tumbled over the side. The vessel is simply where they fell from, not the object they struck. Slipping is another matter entirely. Slipping suggests a loss of traction. A foot sliding on a wet deck, or a handhold that suddenly gave way. Brian did not use those descriptions. On that call, he chose bounced. He chose the adverb basically, a word that softens the blow without changing the fact. And using the word just, it downplays the tragedy while keeping the exact physical details. She basically just bounced right off the dinghy. That phrase is documented. CBS News obtained the audio. NBC News reported on it too. Fox News covered the story. News Nation 2. It is on the public record across multiple major outlets that independently verified the recording contents. Now, let us examine what else Brian said during that 40-minute call. Because that word bounced does not stand alone. It is part of a larger story that Brian fed to the Stevensons. A story that, when stacked against his statements to police and his texts to other friends, reveals glaring contradictions that detectives are now picking apart. On that recorded call, Brian walked the Stevensons through his timeline with surprising detail.
He claimed he and Lynette anchored their boat Soulmate at Aunt Pat's Bay on Elbow Cay.
From there, they took their 8-foot hard-bottom dinghy over to Tahiti Beach,
a famous local spot known for its floating bar at low tide.
After Tahiti Beach, they headed to the Abaco Inn to keep drinking.
Ken, the 38-year-old bartender who poured Brian's drinks twice that night,
told Fox News Digital and the New York Post that he
never actually saw Lynette during the 2.5 hours they were there. She supposedly headed to the pool right when Brian ordered their first drinks. Brian returned 90 minutes later to grab the second round.
security camera footage from the Abaco Inn,
which was reviewed by Carly Ellsworth and her boyfriend Steve, and reported by Ashley Banfield on Drop Dead Serious,
captures the couple leaving the inn at around 6:38 p.m., walking toward the dock.
But Brian told investigators they left around 7:30 p.m.
That leaves a massive gap of 52 minutes between his story and the tape.
On the phone with the Stevensons,
Brian detailed the trip back to the Soulmate, the choppy water conditions, and then the fateful moment.
She basically just bounced right off the dinghy, right in the middle of a little blow,
like 20-something knot winds that just popped up.
a little blow. That is how he described it, not the terrifying storm he claimed on Facebook, where he detailed unpredictable, violent waves and howling winds. Not the brutal weather needed to explain why an experienced former United States Marine failed to find his own wife floating right next to him.
A little blow, 20-something knot winds that just popped up.
And his wife basically just bounced right off the boat.
He even told the Stevensons that the sun set basically 10 minutes after she went over.
At around 6:38 in the evening, the cameras clearly show them leaving the Abaco Inn dock.
Rowing the dinghy out to the Soulmate takes roughly 15 minutes. Jim Todd, a volunteer with Hopetown Fire and Rescue, was dining at a local restaurant that night.
He actually helped pull Brian back to shore the very next morning.
Confirmed this directly to Ashley Banfield.
That at 6:38 p.m., there was still full daylight across those waters.
And that daylight would hold for another 45 minutes to an hour.
Yet Brian told the Stevensons the sun set just 10 minutes after Lynette fell.
Jim Todd's first-hand account of the weather conditions that night proves it was fully bright at the time of
his rumored departure from the Abaco Inn dock. And these are not the only contradictions in Brian's recorded phone call, when compared to the official documentary record.
During that call with the Stevensons,
Brian claimed Lynette tried swimming back to their yacht, which he estimated was roughly 1,000 yards away from where she fell. In text messages sent to his friend, Daniel Danforth,
which were obtained by CBS News, Brian said the wind pushed him away while she swam toward the sailboat.
Yet, according to the official statement from the Royal Bahamas Police Force,
Brian told investigators he last saw his wife swimming back to shore, not toward their sailboat.
toward the shoreline. Swimming to the sailboat is one direction.
swimming to the shore is entirely different.
Both stories cannot be true at once.
He described the exact same moment,
His final sight of Lynette in the water, but gave two completely different paths in his stories.
Danforth called this out directly. During his interview with CBS News, he noted that when comparing Brian's version of Lynette's disappearance
with the evolving media coverage, the details do not match up.
Danforth pointed out that Brian's text suggested she was easily swimming back to the yacht,
But the police claimed Hooker said she was swept away by the sea.
Then there was the issue of their phones.
He stated the couple rarely went anywhere without their mobile phones
and constantly shared clips online. So he questioned why Brian's phone was useless or why they did not have them on board that fateful night. Now, let us focus on that word from the CBS recording, bounced.
When detectives analyze a witness statement,
The precise words someone chooses to describe what happened are never accidental.
They are evidence.
the phrasing people use, especially in a casual setting when they do not know they are being recorded,
reveals exactly how their brain is processing the event they are describing.
That word, bounced, when used to describe someone falling into the sea, does not sound like genuine grief or shock.
It is a highly precise depiction of a very specific physical act.
Carly Ellsworth explained to News Nation that
Their local affiliate, WOOD, that she doubted Brian's story and deeply suspected her stepfather.
she backed up her previous statements, confirming that Brian and Lynette had a long history of volatile clashes.
Especially after they had been drinking.
She told CBS News that Brian typically steered the vessel, which makes his story that Lynette had the kill switch lanyard when she went overboard
Highly unusual, given who normally operated the small dinghy.
In January of 2026, just 3 months before April 4th, Lynette told her daughter about an earlier incident on the boat.
Carly confirmed this detail to CNN and Fox News Digital.
Lynette described a heated argument where Brian actually threatened to throw her into the sea.
A mere 3 months before she mysteriously went overboard on April 4th.
Lynette warned her daughter about a threat involving those exact chilling words.
A 2015 police report sits quietly in the public records.
In it, Lynette told responding officers that Brian had choked her.
Though closed back then for lack of evidence, that file is now central to this investigation.
The very same Marnie Stevenson, whose husband secretly recorded that April 7th phone call,
had exchanged revealing text messages with Lynette back in 2024.
Texts that CBS News obtained and verified.
In those messages, Lynette wrote, "I guess it was too much closeness.
We decided to call it quits. I am absolutely not going back."
When Marnie asked about a reconciliation, Lynette's reply was grim. It was real bad.
I simply cannot be out there with him.
Yet a month later, she returned. She was still at sea with Brian on April 4, 2026.
Now, piece together the chilling reality that this recording starts to reveal.
Brian dialed the Stevensons on April 7th.
The call lasted nearly 40 minutes. He spoke freely to close friends, completely unaware that his voice was being captured.
Across 40 minutes of candidly detailing the absolute worst nightmare of his life.
To friends who trusted him, he described his wife hitting the water with the word bounced.
But there is another detail in that audio that has drawn massive scrutiny.
He said it was a cascade of failures, and I am never going to forgive myself for it.
A cascade of failures.
That phrase has been highlighted by CNN, NBC, CBS, and Fox News.
It appears in every single verified transcript of that taped conversation.
A cascade of failures is a highly analytical way of describing a tragedy. It means a chain of small mistakes that slowly build into an absolute disaster.
This is the language of cold calculation, not of raw grief. It is how an engineer or a military officer, trained to conduct post-operation reviews, would systematically analyze what went wrong.
Brian Hooker once served in the United States Marine Corps.
He was specifically trained to analyze operational breakdowns.
Trained to see how minor mistakes compound into a fatal disaster.
And in his very first, unguarded description of the night his wife vanished forever, he searched for a framework to explain this cascade of failures.
During that same call, he claimed he lost sight of her because the moon had not risen yet.
He also claimed that sundown happened barely 10 minutes after she fell overboard.
But if the sun set 10 minutes after she went overboard,
And security footage shows them leaving the Abaco Inn dock
at around 6:38 p.m., making it a 15-minute ride to the Soulmate, putting the incident at 6:53 p.m.
And sunset in those waters on April 4, 2026, was not until 7:26 p.m. Then the sun was still up when the tragedy allegedly took place. Jim Todd confirmed that 6:38 p.m. was still bright daylight.
Clear, unmistakable daylight that would last for another 45 minutes to an hour.
Brian's claims about pitch darkness and the moon not being up,
And the sun having just set,
is crucial to explaining why it was completely impossible
to find Lynette in the water near his boat.
Without the pitch black, his explanation completely falls apart. On that same tape, Brian insisted he was screaming her name the entire time.
He claimed he spotted several boats and used his phone flashlight and flares to attract
their attention, but none of them noticed him.
He said he threw the anchor over to secure the dinghy. He claimed that by the time the anchor caught,
He had drifted a quarter to half a mile away from her.
a quarter to half a mile translates to 400 to 800 meters. Yet Jim Todd placed the location just 150 yards from the shore. Ken the bartender told Fox News that the total distance from that area to Marsh Harbor, where Brian finally docked, was only 4 miles. Brian told investigators he could not restart the motor and had to paddle.
He reached the boatyard around 4 a.m., nearly 8 hours after leaving the Abaco Inn dock.
4 miles, 7 to 8 hours. The wind, according to Captain Bill, who anchored right next to the Soulmate that night, called the weather on a podcast not that bad. The secret recording Blaine Stevenson made on April 7th, the one Brian had no idea existed, which CBS News obtained and verified, exposes everything. The word bounced, the cascade of failures, and a timeline placing events at sunset when security footage and witnesses from nearby vessels suggest it was still broad daylight. His claims of Lynette swimming toward the sailboat, while police say he told them she headed for shore. 40 minutes of Brian Hooker opening up to friends he trusted.
Brian Hooker has completely denied any wrongdoing.
Categorically.
His lawyer, Terrell Butler, stated that Hooker categorically and unequivocally denies these allegations, and
has fully cooperated with the authorities.
His Michigan attorney, Crystal Marie Hauser, told ABC News that Brian
would never harm his wife of 25 years, asking the public to give him the benefit of the doubt.
In his very first public interview, Brian claimed, right after his release, that he never hurt Lynette,
would never lay a hand on her, and just wants her found.
Currently, he has not been charged with any crime.
Bahamian police officials confirmed to NBC News that Brian Hooker is still a prime suspect who
has not been cleared and could face rearrest.
Investigators now hold that recording, and CBS News verified its authenticity.
They also have Apple Watch data, confirmed by the U.S. Coast Guard to Lynette's mother, Darlene.
Detectives also seized electronic devices.
From the yacht, Soulmate, under a warrant reviewed by CBS News.
A digital video recorder,
Several tablets and mobile phones, all taken as material evidence.
linked to a missing person and bodily harm. The U.S. Coast Guard criminal investigation remains open.
Bahamian authorities likewise continue their active investigation. But what that tape holds, and what is now permanently on the record,
Is the exact word Brian Hooker chose in that raw, unguarded,
Unmonitored, and secret description of the moment his wife of 25 years
went into the ocean on the night of April 4th, 2026.
not fell,
Not slipped or went over, but bounced.
Darlene Hamlet is 76 years old, waiting in Florida for a phone call that never comes.
she told interviewer Ashley Banfield,
I just want to hear, I love you, and wish you could have come home.
Her daughter, Carly, flew directly to the Bahamas to search for her.
she searched the beaches alongside active cadaver dog teams.
Staring at the yacht from a lonely dock, she whispered to the empty air, Hey Mom, I am right here, wherever you are.
Lynette always called the ocean her true happy place.
She shared 10 years of sunsets and ocean life on her blog, The Sailing Hookers.
at 55, she was strong and fit, a lifelong swimmer who loved the deep water.
Back in January 2026, she warned a friend about threats of being thrown overboard.
3 months later,
She vanished into the sea, and the man describing her final moments to friends.
oblivious to the active microphone, chose one very specific word to describe how she fell in.
Bounced.
CBS News obtained that audio. Criminal investigators have everything else, uncovering what truly happened on the water that night of April 4th.
2026 is the justice Lynette deserves.
Every statement must be scrutinized, every alibi weighed.
Every lie followed to the end. The hunt for answers continues.
If you know anything about the disappearance of Lynette Hooker, please contact Bahamian authorities or the United States Coast Guard immediately.
Both investigations remain active. As of right now, Brian Hooker faces no criminal charges.
His attorney states he firmly and completely denies any wrongdoing. Everyone mentioned in this case is presumed innocent unless convicted in court.
This is an active investigation.
Every victim deserves answers, and every story deserves to be heard.